Howdy, I'm Colson Whitehead, the author of The Underground Railroad. I was sitting on my couch about 16 years ago and maybe heard a reference to the Underground Railroad on the TV, and I was like, oh, it's so funny when you're a kid, that's how you envision it. You envision it a literal Underground Railroad, like a subway. What if it actually was a literal Underground Railroad? And then that's sort of like a premise, not much of a plot there. Then I came up with a kind of Gulliver's Travels type structure where each state our protagonist goes through would be a different state of American possibilities. And the more I would talk about this Underground Railroad idea with like my wife or my agent, the more sort of enthusiasm I got. I would say, oh, it's going to be so hard. And they'd say, it sounds really good though. Also, I felt if I waited, I might be a better writer. So sometimes you feel like you have a good idea, but you're not sure if you can do it justice. And then it just seemed like maybe the hard thing is the thing you should be doing. If you don't know you can do it, why not try it? Really, to challenge myself. I had a female protagonist before, but it seemed I'd had a string of male protagonists, so really just to vary it up. And then I hadn't explored a mother-daughter relationship before, so it seemed a good opportunity to try something new. It is a very different state of horror being a woman under slavery than a man. Once you hit puberty, you're supposed to make more slaves, and you have no agency over who you marry or what's going to happen to your children. Cora's on a plantation in Georgia, and her grandmother has staked out a little garden where she grows vegetables, and it's handed down to Cora's mother and then to Cora once Cora's mother disappears. You have nothing. All you have is the clothes on your back, basically. But Cora has this one gift of a garden on the plantation, and it's the one thing she can fight for, the one thing she can call her own. So in the midst of a complete lack of agency, she has power and a place to be creative on the plantation. Cora's never left the plantation before she makes the brave decision to run. And in these different states that she's in, South Carolina or Tennessee, she is getting more and more agency, and she's becoming more of a person in the world and is becoming more active. The further she gets from her original plantation, the more she enters into herself, her Cora-ness. So that's part of the trajectory of the book and her life. In terms of the plantation, I guess in pop culture there's an idea that you have 80 slaves living together, they're helping each other out. Maybe there's like an Uncle Tom or a turncoat, but they're all in together. I mean, and this seems from my idea of human psychology and how people act. If you have 80 people, 8 people are saints, 8 people are terrible, and the rest sort of migrate in between different bits of behavior. But, we talk about PTSD, they're actually not post anything. They're enduring trauma every minute of their lives. And so they're not going to be on their best behavior. They are going to be fighting for every single scrap of dignity that they can have, any kind of advantage to get them through. There's a chapter where there's a white supremacist state where black people are outlawed, and if you harbor a slave, you will be punished too. And so people are informing on each other in the way that I find in Nazi Germany or severe socialist states where people are informing each other so as not to be put in prison themselves or be punished. We'd like to think that if we were put in those situations, we would be our best selves, but if your family's being threatened or your livelihood, maybe you do turn in the teacher who's teaching students inflammatory rhetoric against the state. And so who knows what we do in those situations. Once I made the choice to make the railroad a literal railroad, I'm already leaving the historical record. My philosophy was I'm not going to stick to the facts, but I'll stick to the truth. And so the truth is that we like to demonize the other. And part of entering into the American dream is entering the middle class. When you're an immigrant, you want to assimilate into the larger culture. I didn't want to just talk about black people. I want to talk about Irish immigrants and Italian immigrants and Jewish immigrants. Every generation, there's a new set of people trying to come to America and make it. Sure, if you play by the rules, that's what we're told to believe will happen. If you're a person of color, if you're a woman in different periods of our history, you don't have the rights to achieve what you want to achieve with your life. There are a few good overviews of the Underground Railroad. The one I used first and provide the best background for me was called Bound for Canaan by Fergus Bordwich. But in terms of day-to-day slave life, I went to the big memoirs, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Jacobs. Harriet Jacobs was a woman who ran away from her master and spent 7 years in an attic waiting for passage out of her city. But in the 1930s, the government, trying to put people back to work, decided why not help some writers, and had writers interview former slaves, people who were 80 or 90 years old, who were kids or teenagers when the Civil War happened. And there are hundreds and hundreds of them. Some of them are just like 3 paragraphs, some are 10 pages, and they provide mundane stories about farming, some are about living in the house, some are working in the fields. So that provided me with a lot of the physical details about what they ate and introduced me to the variety of life on the plantations. Slavery was a huge operation planned down to the smallest detail. So if your slave runs away, you place an ad in a newspaper with identifying characteristics the same way you would put a poster for your lost pet, like in a laundromat or something. As a fiction writer, I like making things up. I like being a ventriloquist sometimes and doing different people's voices. But I couldn't compete with the language of the slave ads. They say so much about the slave and also the master and the whole business of slavery. People do ask me, this being 2 years after Ferguson unrest and the rise of Black Lives Matter, was I influenced by current events? I've been aware of police brutality since I hit puberty, and my dad was like, "You're a target whenever you leave the house." If the book is good, it could have come out 3 years ago and people still respond to it, and hopefully 10 years from now, people are reading it and have a different sort of template for their responses. So we do have these periodic conversations about what we're going to do about race relations. Usually it's kind of short-lived, and then we go back to the usual silence. In hoping there's a better world for my kids, I have to be a little more optimistic than I have been previously. I think the progress we make is very slow. We're constantly trying to make a better version of our country, a better version of ourselves, and that's a hard enterprise, whether you're talking about the individual or the larger nation. The fact I'm here and I work for a big publisher and my books get distributed and I can choose what clothes I wear means I'm not in a state of slavery. So that has improved. We have an African-American president. I certainly didn't think that would happen when I was a kid. In writing these books, I'm trying to figure out things about myself and about the world, and writing the book is a journey and an inquiry. So hopefully when I get to the last page, I've done it in such a way that the reader's also taking along on my sort of investigations, if you do it right. But whenever you attack a subject, whether it's war, slavery, domestic relationships, people smarter and more talented than you have done it before. All you can do is hopefully add something to the literature. I would just say keep writing and failing, and then the next story will be a little bit better. The third story will be even better still. Then you'll have a relapse and get worse. And that's part of finding your voice. And if you only write about 18-year-olds from New Jersey who are much like you, why not write about a 19-year-old from New York who's male or female and a different sex, and try that on and keep expanding your repertoire of characters and voices and see what fits you. If you're afraid of not writing the first person, write in the third person, and keep testing yourself.